Hello, welcome to Somerset News Network. Donald Trump has been elected the President of the United States. The world now has hope. He's announced yesterday, only his second day as a President-elect, that he wants a big celebration of the anniversary of 250 years of the War of Independence. Now, the War of Independence was 1775. It was us, the English, who were fighting, and we were in the wrong. I'm going to admit that. But you've got to remember, what you're fighting today under Trump is what you were fighting us for back in 1775. It was the deep state, the money men, the guys that are in charge, the crooks that want to control everything. You were fighting them then, and now you're fighting them now, and hopefully that Donald Trump will put things right. He said he was going to drain the swamp. I think he'll pull the plug out on them this time. But this is what was happening in the late 1700s. I don't think that there would have been a War of Independence if William Pitt was still the Prime Minister at the time. In 1770, William the Pitt was ill. He was unable to be Prime Minister. He was unable to govern. So they appointed Lord North as the Prime Minister. And that's when things started to go wrong. We were putting taxes on America to pay for the war that we'd had with the French, the 7-Year War. Now, the Americans, you blame George III, but you've got to remember that George III had no powers. Britain, England, our Parliament did things in the name of the King. The King had no power. We stripped the power of the King from him, or from the Queen, whichever one it is, in 1688. We had the Glorious Revolution. After James II was a tyrant, he only wanted Catholics to hold office. He disarmed the Protestants. And we had the Glorious Revolution, and it was called the Glorious Revolution because it was bloodless. There wasn't a shot fired. The Parliament, the Lords, the Barons, invited the Prince of Orange from Holland and Queen Mary, who's the daughter of James II, to be King and Queen, joint monarchs. Only time in history it happened. They came over to Devon, to somewhere around Brixham, Newquay area, and went up what is now the A303 and headed for London with troops and hoping to gather people on the way. By the time they'd got to London, James II had opted and gone to Scotland. So we had a transition of government, and it was free of any bloodshed. That's why it's called the Glorious Revolution. That stripped the power of the King and put it in the hands of Parliament. Now, it's wrong to say that all the War of Independence was because of King George. My findings and my reading of history is the guys to blame are the guys that were the deep state. And they were helping and controlling a guy called Lord North, who was then the Prime Minister. They put loads of taxes on the Americans, which was unfair. There was a sugar tax. There was a currency tax. Now I'm going to have to look at my notes here because it's quite complicated. There was a barracks tax to tax the Americans to hold our troops in America. There was the New England Restraining Act. And what that did is that meant that the Boston area and the colonies in America could not trade with any other country apart from Britain. It was wrong. It wasn't free trade, it was restriction of trade, because the deep state and the guys making the money wanted to control it. There was a stamp tax, and they taxed official papers to try and raise money for the war with the French, which was 7 years before. You know, how crazy can you get? You know, it's like today they would tax everybody that sent an email. You know, nobody would then send emails, you'd send letters. It's craziness. But they want England wanted to raise money. I think it could have been done other ways, but that's a story to have later on. What I'm trying to say is that Britain, England, the Parliament, was ruled by Lord North. Lord North and his cronies, the deep state. They put all these taxes on. And the colonies were right to say no taxation without representation. No problem with that at all. They had a good argument. The only problem is, as I read it, it was the crooks and the deep states in America that didn't want England to rule them so they could rule themselves and make more money. And one of the things they wanted to do was maintain slavery. Meanwhile, in England, there was a guy called James Somerset. James Somerset was an ex-slave. He said he was free. His owner, Charles Stuart, who was a tax officer, a customs officer in Boston, that comes up later as well, he said he was a free man and he couldn't be a slave in England. There was a court case. He was imprisoned by a ship's captain to take back to Boston. He appealed against it. The abolitionists at the time supported him and supported the court case and used their lawyers. They went to court and argued that no man could own another, which was English common law. Exactly where that came from, I'm not sure. Some of the commentators, it goes back to 1066 and William the Conqueror. William the Conqueror allowed slavery. What? On the Laws of William, if you look on the internet, I found it on the Yale history website. He forbid the selling of a man outside of the country. So then therefore it was illegal to sell somebody within England. Now, I think that it was got rid of by Edward III in 1297 when he reaffirmed the Magna Carta and he brought in other freedoms, because he was fighting the barons, and he gave the barons freedom, which then went down to the people. And then 1354 there was Liberties of the Subject Act, which said there must be due process of law. And that's where that saying comes from. And that created the legal profession. Anyway, let's get back to the War of Independence. After we had taxed you, and you didn't like it, you had the Boston Tea Party. Now, I'm thinking this court case of 1772 with James Somerset outlawed slavery because no man could own another. That would also be true for the colonies, because you were an English colony. Therefore, slavery would be banned. Therefore, it was in the interests of the deep state, the crooks, to get rid of English rule within America, which allowed slavery to continue for another 100 years. That's what I think. Now, it's going to be a big celebration. Donald Trump wants to have a national celebration of 250 years of the War of Independence. I hope that our government, under Starmer, I don't see it, but I hope, is going to apologise for what we did. Because we were in the wrong. You know, they talk about, Donald Trump talks about common sense policies. But that comes from Thomas Paine. Before the War of Independence, Thomas Paine was talking about common sense. Nigel Farage and the Reform Party in the UK is talking about common sense policies. So all this is nothing new. It's happened before. We have to redress the balance. And I believe that Donald Trump is the man to do it. And I hope if Donald Trump can do it, we can then say to our Prime Minister and the Labour Party, look, this is the way to make a country prosper. All your policies and taxing us, which is what they've promised now, they're going to tax, it looks like they're going to tax everything, it's going to fall flat. And we're going to have to readjust the balance here someday. So you've got to remember that the War of Independence was not the fault of King George. It was done in King George's name by Lord North and his cronies, the deep state. Anyway, that's all I really wanted to say today. And we'll do another video on something else later. Anyway, Ian, Somerset News Network, signing off.